the body is connected to the brain via nerves, but there always has to be something that converts the body, the energy impinging on the body, into neural impulses that are carried by nerves into the brain, or there's no consciousness.
This turning inward is not about watching the electrical processes in my brain. It is about looking at something far more fundamental within myself. If we conclude that there is nothing more fundamental apart from electricity, well, then a light bulb lights up, that's enlightenment. We should not look at it that way.
Sometimes actual fraud and flim-flam, as in the self-designated clairvoyants who turn out just to use cheap stage magic. They often fool the physicists because physicists are as foolable by stage magic as anyone else. The ones they don't fool are fellow magicians who can easily expose the tricks.
Stuff that has happened, people claiming all kinds of miracles happening from here, there, God is talking to me and all this stuff. We are not talking about that, we are not talking about clairvoyance, we are not talking about telepathy, please use the telephone. Don't compete with the telephone company, all right? So, but is there something more profound to human existence than physiological and psychological drama? In my experience, 100% there is.
You are saying and what Sadhguru is saying, so Sadhguru wants to respond, I think. You want to pass the mic to him?
Well, I think we're coming from two different contexts. That's why I said probably in the Western religions, the word miracle is being used for lack of words, because I already kind of excuse myself saying I'm uncivilized. Miracle is a way of duping people. I'm not talking about the word miracle in that context, that's why I said there's a different way to look at life. If you look at everything as logical steps, our logical steps progress with whatever data we have. Nobody can claim they have data about everything that's life and the whole phenomena of creation, nobody has. Neither the religious people nor the men of science know where the existence or the cosmos begins and where it ends. Nobody knows. Hello? Nobody knows. But somebody is bombastic enough to explain it all happened because of one person up there, another is trying to piece it together, piece by piece. But how many pieces ever you gather? Because today modern science is recognizing this is a ever-expanding universe. If it's an ever-expanding universe, it doesn't matter how many pieces of the jigsaw you collect, you still don't have a full picture. So in that context, I'm saying we go as far as our logic and our data takes us. From there is a blind spot which we do not know, we just hope it happens. And sometimes we have found if you do certain things happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But the important thing is using the word miracle as a way to fool people to believe things and working through a logical process for all the phenomenal activity that we do in the world, there is no contest about that, there is no any difference about that. But coming to the consciousness, once again I would like to distinguish your awareness of yourself right now and consciousness are two different entities altogether. Your awareness is definitely a consequence of all the things that are happening in the brain. I've not looked because I don't have one, I'm only experiencing it through other people. So, I do not know all that, but definitely it's a consequence of what's happening. Things are firing up, we know. I may not know exactly where, how it's firing up, I know things are fired up within us, which is creating a certain awareness. So, this awareness is a consequence of activity, not just the brain, I wouldn't go with that. I think there is a brain right across. From your toes to your head, everywhere there is different levels of brain. I don't want to call it brain, we call this mental body. There is memory and there is intelligence right across. So only if all this fires up, then you have an experience of life. How much it fires up will determine how profound an experience of life you have. This is a different aspect. We're talking about consciousness. That is not exactly an appropriate word in English language, because that's the only word we have as far as I know. Normally we call this chitta. Chitta means an intelligence without memory. It has no intent, but you can create any intent for it. With the same life energy, somebody will do evil things. With the same life energy, somebody will do wonderful things, because it has no intent. It's simply there, it empowers you whichever way. Let's say it's like electricity. You can make sound out of it, you can make light out of it, you can make whatever you want out of it. Just like that, the fundamental force which drives us has no intent. So, when we say consciousness, we are referring to that aspect of intelligence which has no intent because it has no memory. But if you give it memory, it will immediately gain an intent and a direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would certainly echo and endorse and reinforce the idea that we meaning humanity, we meaning science, are ignorant of a vast array of topics. Even as we learn more, we become more aware of what we're ignorant of. We have to be prepared to change our minds. That's in the very nature of science, as we've just learned through living through the COVID pandemic, where in the early weeks there were all kinds of things that we believed, like you've got to wash your groceries and you can't touch your face, and that turned out even our best experts were wrong. But it's in the nature of science that best experts are wrong, because we start out ignorant of everything and we have to learn it as we go along. And the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is to learn. And there's much about the functioning of the brain, to put it mildly, that we don't understand, including many of the phenomena of consciousness. But it's just crucial not to translate our ignorance into a belief in miracles. There is the well-known fallacy of the God of the gaps. That is, that which you don't understand at a particular point in scientific development, you are tempted to invoke a source of miracles, namely God. It used to be Zeus hurling thunderbolts when people didn't understand how lightning worked. It used to be life when before we had the theory of evolution. And likewise, for people who know nothing about brain science, the idea that consciousness is a miracle is very tempting. And even as we learn more but still don't know some things, it is tempting fallacy to bring in miracles for our ignorance. But the best attitude toward ignorance is certainly humility. There are many things that science doesn't understand, but part of that humility is acknowledging there are certain things we don't understand. And it's just in the nature of us as not sub-omniscient beings. We are not divine. We do experiments. We propose hypotheses. A lot of them are wrong. We need to build bigger and bigger scientific instruments. Even when we do, there'll be questions that we can't answer. And the right attitude is there's some questions of which we are ignorant, and that is the part of the humility is not inventing miracles to fill those gaps, but rather acknowledging that ignorance. Now, let me switch to a question of whether there is consciousness through the body as opposed to activity in the brain. And admittedly, it is certainly true that the English language does not give us enough words to point to the different phenomena that we think about, ask questions about, seek to explain. And philosophers have tried to refine our vocabulary. There's no reason to think that ordinary conversation would provide the vocabulary to make sense of consciousness any more than it does for the various tissues of the body, the various molecules in the brain, the various phenomena of physics, you got to invent jargon. When it comes to consciousness, you distinguish, Sadhguru, between consciousness and awareness. And there is indeed a distinction between access to information, I don't know whether awareness is the right word for that, and the subjectivity, the qualitative aspect of consciousness, sometimes called the raw feels, just the saltiness of salt and the redness of red and so on. So awareness, since it is tempting for specialists, including philosophers, to invent jargon, and of necessity, because the phenomena you study in depth aren't just going to have labels sitting around from everyday conversation. For example, the philosopher Ned Block has distinguished between what he calls phenomenal consciousness and access consciousness. Access consciousness may or may not be what you were referring to as awareness. Access consciousness would be the jargon term for having access to information. So as just an example, I do have access consciousness, say, to the color of your suit, to the presence of people in this room. I can talk about it, I can imagine it, I can answer questions about it. I don't have access to the particular geometric shape on my retina that your suit projects. I know that's in the brain, but I just can't talk about it. I don't have access to the exact sequence of muscle contractions of my tongue that allow me to speak. My brain does somewhere. It's unconscious. There's no need for me to think about it because it's automatic and it happens. So there's a lot of activity in the brain to which we don't have access, and there is some to which we do have access. So that's one refinement of the vocabulary of consciousness that we inherited just from the English language. The contrast to access consciousness is phenomenal consciousness, and that is the qualitative, the so-called hard problem, sometimes called sentience. Although there too, sadly, English doesn't give us precise technical terms to make sense of our experience. When a computer scientist at Google thought that one of their large language models was sentient, he was using sentient in a sense that is very different from the one that I think philosophers would want to reserve it for, namely the actual phenomenal or subjective or qualitative aspect of consciousness. Because there's no way, no matter how smart your AI program is, you can't really know whether there's someone home actually feeling something as opposed to it just producing intelligent responses in context. That's another reason why the hard problem is called hard, just because it's very hard to know how could we ever tell whether a perfectly lifelike robot, a perfectly intelligent AI program, was consciousness in the phenomenal sense, in the sentient sense, in the qualitative sense of there's someone somewhere in there that's actually feeling something. Like, how would you know? And in fact, this is often another way in which we humans make sense of these conundrums that are not intuitive is we explore them in fiction, in science fiction, in the fictions that philosophers create called thought experiments. But as an example that may be familiar to a number of you, there was several decades ago in Star Trek: The Next Generation, there was a plot that revolved around whether it would be morally acceptable to disassemble Lieutenant Commander Data, an android, to reverse engineer him. Would that just be dismantling a machine, or would it be snuffing out a consciousness, a sentience, a living life? Now, it's great entertainment to think it through, and one of the things fiction does is it allows us to ponder philosophical puzzles, and that being another good way to illustrate it, and another way of showing that our vocabulary as we use it in ordinary conversation, may just not be up to the task of the sharp distinctions we want to make as thinkers, as scientists, as philosophers, as thoughtful people. Finally, one more observation. I think that there is a way to make sense of the question of, is, say, consciousness distributed through the body, or does it consist of brain activity? I think the answer is brain activity. And we can actually imagine the circumstances that tease them apart. I mean, when someone steps on my toe, I feel the pain in my toe, but there's every reason to think that what is happening is a pattern of activity in my brain. I localize it in my toe, but the crucial events, the crucial natural physical events, consist of activity in the brain. How do we know? Because often amputees will have phantom limb pain. They'll still feel the foot even though there ain't no foot. And that can happen. We have all kinds of bodily hallucinations. We have out-of-body experiences. We have dreams where it's not the body. People who are quadriplegic, where the body is no longer functioning, still have full consciousness, often of their body in phantom limb experiences. Conversely, if the brain is active, if someone is in a deep vegetative state, if they are in a deep coma, we can't know because there's no one to ask, but the fact that their foot continues to have blood flowing into it does not mean that there is someone somewhere feeling that foot. As best we know, if the brain areas for the foot are not active, there is no one or nothing that corresponds to consciousness of the foot. So the consciousness doesn't need the foot, it does need the brain, as far as we know, and that's a reason to conclude that consciousness consists in brain activity, not the distributed through the body. Now, of course, the body is connected to the brain via nerves, because there are sensory transducers. There are little itty-bitty cells in the skin that respond to changes in temperature and pressure by transmitting nervous impulses to the brain. Likewise, in the eye, there are photoreceptors, rods and cones that transduce light energy into neural activity. There are hair cells in the inner ear that transduce vibrations into neural impulses, but there always has to be something that converts the body, the energy impinging on the body, into neural impulses that are carried by nerves into the brain, or there's no consciousness. How do we know? Well, if, again, you're an anesthesiologist, even in the case of the anesthesia that my dentist does, injects a chemical into my jaw and he can drill at my teeth and I don't feel anything. I mean, the teeth are still there, but no more consciousness of pain in my teeth, thank goodness. Likewise, if there is nerve damage, if there's a pinched nerve, if there is a severed nerve, if there's severed spinal cord, the part of the body that cannot send physical signals to the brain, there is no longer any consciousness of, suggesting that it's the brain via information transmitted into the brain that is the seat of consciousness.
Everything that we perceive through five sense organs, of course, it is processed in the brain, which is not just today's understanding, it's always been so in most parts of the world. And the brain that we are talking about, where was it manufactured? It was manufactured in this body, by this body. We did not buy it or import it from somewhere, it was made from this body. It didn't come to us from elsewhere. So the evolution of the brain within the individual human being happened in this body. So essentially, the way we look at this is, we don't look at brain as something different, it is just body with a different levels of functionality. Significant levels of functionality. A whole lot of people may be walking around this university without their brains functioning, but their livers, kidneys and hearts are functioning. Without that, they wouldn't be walking. So, I'm not questioning whether the brain is significant in doing all these processes, no question at all about that. But is it the be-all of everything? No, because there are still so many aspects of life which are unexplained. So someday when we have the data, we will explain. But you can gather data only about physical aspects of life. So essentially, if we have concluded that the whole existence is just physical, well, today morning we were talking to all the physicists, they're all talking about over 90% or 99% of everything seems to be empty, it is not physical. So this, in the yogic culture, we look at it this way, we see that everything was nothing. It was called Shiva, that means it was that which is not. This that which is not went into a ripple because of a certain influence of energy, and once it went into a ripple, it gathers memory. Once it gathers memory, it finds an intent and a direction. From this various miraculous levels of… I'm using that word very consciously, miraculous levels of multiple millions and millions of forms of creation happened. Just the life on this planet is so absolutely mind-boggling that the numbers and the variety of life that's happened, if you look at the whole cosmos, we don't even know what is what. So, this happened and this is still functioning in every bit of life, in everything. Even in a single atom, over 99% is supposed to be, or 93 or 94% is supposed to be empty. What is this emptiness? So, this is what we refer to as consciousness, which is the basis of everything. Well, you can define it as space, you can call it as nothingness, you can call it as dark matter or dark energy, whatever, but essentially it is that which is not. When we say that which is not, it is not physical in nature, which is fundamental to all physical creation. So, can we explain this logically? Yes, to a certain point we can. Maybe all the way we can, but explanation and reality are two different things. We can always explain everything, we can always explain the whole phenomena of human life, but the reality of human life is totally different, it's experienced by different people in different ways. Let's say there are two siblings, same genetic material, same home, same school, but they don't function the same way because the way they receive, the way they process is different. Well, that is not what we're talking about, but the important thing to understand is human experience is coming not necessarily only from the brain activity, but to what extent do we delve into that aspect of life which has no information but has intelligence. When this intelligence fires, suddenly human beings do things that other people never thought is possible. That's when people think it's miraculous. I am not using the word miracle in the religious context of saying, I did something like that and it happened, not in that context, but something that you cannot find logical explanation because, as you said, what is that, God gap, is it? What was the… huh? God of the gaps. No, we are not talking about God of the gaps either. The gaps are there because of ignorance that we know, but there are dimensions of life which are not physical in nature. What is not physical in nature, neither can you define nor describe nor perceive through five senses. Right now, everything that we know is through five senses. What is wrong with five senses? Nothing wrong. It is just that for different creatures, these senses are different. What is light for you, for a whole lot of creatures, it is darkness. What is darkness for you is light for them. Because the sense organs are designed as it is necessary for our survival process. Based on your survival requirement, accordingly it is designed. So what you see, what a grasshopper sees, what a dragonfly sees are very different because these sense organs are designed for our survival process. And our survival process may be very different from one creature to another. In that context, what we call as brain is just that receptive process or that reception place where it receives all these impulses from senses. To what extent means in a day, even if you walk around the place unconsciously or reasonably unconsciously, still you're receiving millions of gigabytes of memory going into your system, and all this is being stored, processed, whatever. In some minds it may be well done, in some minds it may be randomly done, but it is all being recorded, nobody is missing it. So, this process is a tremendous process for the brain to handle. But the fundamental existence of who we are, is it only because of brain-derived neurological activity or electrical makeup of things? That would be believing in a miracle. That's not a miracle, that is a simple process which is creating fantastic things for us, no question. Fantastic things. It is done to ourselves and to the world in many, many ways. Nobody is questioning the efficacy of that brain. But the important thing is, when we talk about my brain, obviously we are talking about someone who owns the brain also. You don't say, I'm the brain, you're saying, this is my body, this is my brain. This means there is somebody beyond that. Is this a body? No. An entity that we cannot define, an entity that we cannot describe, an entity that we cannot perceive through sense perception, but we know we are here, we know we exist. Well, if we think it's only because we are thinking and processing we exist, no, we exist even without that.
We do have our five senses, each one of which relies on a ingenious little bit of tissue that converts physical energy into neural impulses. I mean, and we might have more than five senses depending on how you count. But what we don't have, and this is also relevant to whether consciousness is a miracle, is extrasensory perception, ESP, that is access to states of the world not mediated through some physical transmission of signals. ESP often held to comprise telekinesis, the ability to move objects or cause physical changes through brain power; clairvoyance, the ability to sense the state of the world without any causal chain of transmission of information; precognition, the ability to foresee the future; and telepathy, the ability to sense other people's thoughts. And there is a lively tradition going back millennia of believing that ESP exists, and we know it doesn't exist. I mean, if we know anything, that every attempt to demonstrate one of the varieties of extrasensory perception has been shown to be overinterpretation of coincidences interpreted post hoc. You remember the hits, you bury all of the misses and false alarms. Sometimes actual fraud and flim-flam, as in the self-designated clairvoyants who turn out just to use cheap stage magic. They often fool the physicists because physicists are as foolable by stage magic as anyone else. The ones they don't fool are fellow magicians who can easily expose the tricks. The fact that there is no ESP, one more bit of evidence is we have never, all it would take is a tiny bit of statistical precognition. You don't even need to foresee events exactly, but just beyond the base rate probabilities, and you could get arbitrarily rich in the futures market. You could short or long, Bitcoin or Tesla stocks, and if you could really see if someone somewhere out there could really see the future, they'd be the richest person on earth, because it would not take very much predictive power to outsmart the rest of the market. No such person exists. More evidence that consciousness is not a miracle, that the senses really are the only way in which we can derive information about empirical reality. If someone were to show that ESP existed, I would have to revise a lot of my beliefs about the nature of consciousness and mental activity.
We're in no way referring to such things like ESP or magical ways of knowing things, no. I'm talking about the fundamental existence of who we are. Do we exist? I think in most human beings' experience, unless they're lost in their logic, If you simply sit here, you know you exist. So, this knowing that I exist is not a derivative of neuronal or electrical activity in the brain alone. Even beyond that we exist, because there are states where all this can come down to almost nothing, and still you exist, actually you exist much more. I'm hearing a lot of experiments going on with hallucinogenics and mushrooms and stuff in the universities, not by the students, by the professors. So, they are saying that when they have these spectacular experiences, the brain activity has actually come down, not gone up, as everybody would have believed. So, there are states. See, one important thing is, we should not conclude, especially science should never conclude what we do not know cannot exist. That will not be a good thing to do.
Yes, but nor should we make up stuff for which we have no reason to believe it exists.
Thank you. That was great conversation, but I think there are millions of people around the world, even who experience the states of the deeper states of meditation. It's not just one or two, from different schools they've experienced, which are not explainable by current ways of examining them, because we don't have the tools for it. So we're not able to explain the deeper states of meditation and the states they live in. So that is not made up, right? So how do we experience? That is an unknown thing. So that's all we're saying, just be open and examine that in a way that, can we understand that or not?
Well, we may not understand it in the sense that it involves such unfathomably intricate patterns of brain activity, one brain pattern leading to another brain pattern, in ways that we may not understand. I don't know if we don't understand it in the sense that it must involve some new form of energy or some kind of contradiction of the idea that it's all brain activity. But brain activity can be really, really complex, and there's an awful lot we don't understand, including the effects of meditation. Now, what I am very skeptical of is that any state of meditation, for example, can result in clairvoyance or telekinesis or telepathy or precognition. And I assume you're not. I'm sure you're not. I assume you're not stating that meditation can accomplish that.
No, not at all. So,
Yeah.
for example, Matthew Ricard's brain. I think Stephen Lawrence is here. He examined his brain, and they've looked at their brain activity, functional MRI, etc., and they showed a relaxed, alert state where everything is fired up. And this is like a trait for him. It's not like a state examination, and they could see that relaxed alertness leads to fired up brain completely, but still relaxed. So that is not the usual pattern that happens in a normal person who is not meditating, right? So, for example.
Yes.
So I'm not proposing that they're clairvoyant. That is very different. I'm just saying that these are rare, and these kind of brains, it seems like they're just completely fired up, but still very, very relaxed. So I think that's a great state to be in.
No, that's interesting. I admire Matt Sheffield. I had an event with him in Paris in which we talked about the historical processes that lead to peace. And indeed, there may be aspects of brain function that we don't understand that could be illuminated by meditation, understood as one complex pattern of brain activity leading to another complex pattern of brain activity, all within the realm of the natural.
See, the things that we're talking about, clairvoyance, telepathy, these are childish tricks. That's not what we're referring to. The English word meditation doesn't define anything. This is a problem. Because when it comes to subjectivity, English language is very poor. When it comes to objective world, English language is phenomenally effective. Having said that, if someone closes their eyes and sits, generally people say, oh, he or she is meditating. You can close your eyes and do japa, tapa, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, shunya, samyama. Well, these are all distinct states which are taught and transmitted in a systematic way, not just some some mumbo-jumbo way that I try to redefine the word miracle, but you're sticking to the religious form of miracle. I'm not going there, let's leave that word. Let's say magical experiences. Because magic can still be explained, but it's still magical in our experience. Leaving that aside, we can clearly transmit these aspects distinctly from one to the other. If they come to a dharana initiation, we will do only dharana. If they come to dhyana, we'll do only dhyana. If they come to samyama, we do only samyama. Distinctly different states that a human being can experience. Is all this about electrical activity? Someday, I think, the scientists must invest enough time to study these things, not with the attitude of proving or disproving it, but just by looking at it. Just simply looking at it without making conclusions, because conclusions are coming from what present things that we know, what data that we have. The very fundamental of science is that whatever we know right now is not everything. That is the fundamental of science we are seeking. Because seeking comes from the most fundamental realization that we do not know, that's why we are seeking. Seeking is genuine only if we see, I do not know. If I'm seeking this or that, I already know it is there, I'm looking for confirmation, that's not seeking, we're just making it up. So, essentially, it is very important if these two disciplines have to meet. It's because these two disciplines meeting is very important for human well-being. Just we thinking that improving the economies of the world, which is wonderful, changing the social structures of the world, which is fantastic, providing medical care, this, that, everything is fantastic, but still, human beings will still not attain to any sense of fulfillment or fullness of experience of life unless they turn inward. This turning inward is not about watching the electrical processes in my brain. It is about looking at something far more fundamental within myself. If we conclude that there is nothing more fundamental apart from electricity, well, then a light bulb lights up, that's enlightenment. We should not look at it that way. Now, because we must understand this whole thing is coming from, I'm sorry if I'm making some generalization, it is a generalization, but I'm saying this contextually. See, this whole the European thing about enlightenment or a period of enlightenment has come because they were under the tyranny of dogmatic belief systems. When they broke away, they felt liberated. But such a thing never existed in the East. We never faced such things. There was no anything dogmatic ruling us. Thinking and, thinking to whatever extent we can was always free for us. So we never thought thinking free is enlightenment. For us, enlightenment is a much more profound process. So, breaking away from dogma and thinking freely, it's a basic human right, I don't call that enlightenment. But because of that background, your resistance for the word miracle is essentially coming from the religious, stuff that has happened, people claiming all kinds of miracles happening from here, there, God is talking to me and all this stuff. We are not talking about that, we are not talking about clairvoyance, we are not talking about telepathy, please use the telephone. Don't compete with the telephone company, all right? So, but is there something more profound to human existence than physiological and psychological drama? In my experience, 100% there is.
Thank you.